Hello, and once again to all of you, my brilliant students. It's so wonderful to have you guys in class again today, whether that be virtually or whether that be in person. I am looking forward to getting to go through this lesson with you because if you are watching this video, then that means that we have already gone through our ACT kind of prep a little bit. We've already taken our pre-test, and so therefore we are using some raw data. We're using some raw materials to actually use for our own strategy as far as our moving forward into the next unit. All right, so this unit's going to be a lot about grammar. This unit's going to be a lot about vocabulary, but also this unit is going to be a lot about actually beating the test, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want for you to learn the best strategies for taking standardized tests and to use the limited time and energy that you have available to the maximum efficiency, the maximum efficacy that you have. Okay, so you guys have already taken that ACT pre-test that I've given you. You guys have already know the ropes. You guys know that you have 45 minutes. You guys know that there's no cell phones allowed. And I tried to recreate those conditions as much as I possibly can as if you were in an ACT room, right? So let's go ahead and get started and let's figure out how are we going to beat this thing. So we've taken that standard ACT test. Now what? Keep in mind that you will be taking the ACT whenever you are a junior in high school, okay? So that's going to be next year. You're going to be taking it next year, and so you're going to want to remember these things. You're going to want to take notes on these things, or at least commit them to memory, or come back and watch this maybe as, a precursor or just as a review before you end up taking that ACT test. So everyone takes this test, right? Pretty much everyone in the school, pretty much everyone in the state of Oklahoma takes the ACT. Now, without getting too much into the politics of it, standardized tests are good for measuring just that. I think, personally, standardized tests are just good for measuring a particular standard. Okay, that's the reason why they exist. I do not think that they are good indicators of a student's ability. I don't even think that they're necessarily a good indicator of a student's knowledge because some kids are not really good at tests, or some kids do not thrive in a test-taking environment, right? Some people don't learn the way, and some people don't even teach the way that a test is asking you to teach it, or asking you for the answers and asking you for the output, right? And that is okay. And that's why I don't mind telling you, hey, this is a standardized test, and this is how you beat it. If we can use the test itself, if we can use our knowledge of the test itself against it, or if we can use it for your own success, yes, I'm absolutely going to do that because, frankly, whenever it comes to standardized testing, not everyone should be at the same standard, although that is the reality of things right now. And in fact, you're seeing that a lot of colleges are oscillate between this trend. Some colleges will place a great big emphasis on standardized testing. Other colleges will not place a big emphasis on standardized testing. And honestly, that kind of waxes and wanes. But if I can help it, I'm not going to let a standardized test get in between you and your success. So I use standardized tests to study growth in my students. Okay, I give you the pretest, we go through the unit, we go through the lessons, right? I see what you know at the very beginning, and then I see what you know at the very end, and so I have that same standard at the beginning and at the very end, and therefore we're able to see like a pretty good gauge of what your growth is, okay? We're getting a pretty good gauge of how much you have learned or how much you have mastered, all right? And that's what I'm all about, is mastery. So it's not just in the test material, but I'm also going to be teaching you how to strategize with the test itself, okay? So get ready to take your notes or commit these things to memory. So the first thing is in the English portion, you have 45 minutes. You also know that in the English portion, you have 75 questions. Now, if you do a quick math, then you know that that is about 36 seconds per question. It's not a whole lot of time, is it? And really what most students will go into, even if they don't know that it's 36 seconds per question, they are just going to hope that they're going to be able to find the answer quick enough on the easy questions so that they have enough time on the more difficult questions. The result of that is that most of you don't finish the test. Most of you guys end up with multiple blanks. Sometimes you don't even get to the later passages, right? And that was the case across the board in all of my 10th grade classes, and it always has been. I can't think of a single class of students that has come through as 10th graders that at least half of them did not finish the test, okay? And that's most of you. And actually, here's a dirty little secret. The test was designed that way. The test was designed for you to not necessarily be able to make all of those questions, or for you to be able to answer all of those questions in the allotted time. Why that is, they're mean. I don't know. But for whatever reason, I guess it's one of those things to where it's like they just want to see how far you go in a certain time limit and then gauge your ability off of that for some reason. And so if that's the case, then yeah, let's go ahead and find a way to beat the clock, because the number one enemy that you have in a standardized test is the clock. The second enemy is yourself, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So since time is your number one enemy, you need to use some strategies to help beat the clock, okay? So the first thing that I would say is this. Don't think in terms of 36 seconds per question. Think of it in terms of this. You have 45 minutes and there are 5 passages. That means you should be allotting yourself about 9 minutes, maybe 10 minutes per passage, okay? If you allot yourself 9 minutes per passage, all of a sudden that seems a lot more manageable than having only 36 seconds, knowing that the clock is counting down again each time you move to another question, right? So if you can time yourself to about 9 minutes per passage, you are going to already be setting yourself up in your brain, right, for success. So if you have about 10 minutes per passage, if you're going to time yourself according to this, and go ahead and budget your time according to this, knowing, okay, I've got 9 minutes here, I've got 9 minutes here, 9 minutes here, 9 minutes here, maybe 5 minutes here, 6 minutes here, right? And that is okay, all right? Because within those passages, within those questions, you'll notice certain patterns, and we'll get to that here in a second, okay? So the first thing I want to remind you is do not reread the instructions. You're just wasting time. You already know what they say. Okay, you're going to fill in the blanks, or you're going to give the correct answer or the best answer, right? Make corrections. Insert sentences where they need to go. Insert paragraphs where they need to go. If you're going to rearrange the sentence, how are you going to rearrange the sentence? And the thing is those don't change. Once you've taken one standardized test, you've pretty much taken all of them, and there's not very much variation. So you don't need to read the instructions. The instructions are not going to say, give me the worst answer. They're always going to say, give me the best answer, okay? And it's not even going to say, give me the right answer, because oftentimes you will have 2 correct answers, right? But then there will be one that is better, or one that is more proper, or one that is more appropriate. And so it's always going to say the same thing. And so whenever that teacher goes up to you, that test administrator goes up and they begin reading the directions, and they say it really slow or really monotone or really fast and really monotone, because, like, I don't know, anyone who reads directions excitedly, whenever they do that, and then you go, oh no, I didn't hear what they said, I need to go back and I need to double check what all the... No, you don't need to double check what the directions are, because frankly, you've already read them. We have read them together as a class. You have gone back and you have read through them individually yourself. You don't need to read them in that test. You don't need to waste your time doing that. So don't use that time to actually get to the actual answering of the questions. Now, as you move through the test, I want you to remember this. Every question is worth the same number of points, and that means that if you have a question that is difficult, you can feel free to skip it. You'll notice that as you go through the different passages, there are multiple types of questions. The first few questions, about 1 to 6 questions, are going to be fairly simple. They're going to be like finding things and replacing things, inserting a comma, things that you really just need the context of that one sentence. And then you'll have, I would say after those 5 to 7 questions, you might have about 3 questions where you might need to read the sentence before and the sentence after. Okay, and you'll need to get a little bit more of that context in order to answer the question. And then the last 2 questions, or maybe the last 3 questions, sometimes you will need to understand what the entire passage is about. Okay, so here's the thing. If you've got 9 minutes per passage and you're coming up on your last minute and you've got, 5 questions left, go ahead and use that last minute and skip to whatever is going to be easiest, all right? Don't skip necessarily to the hardest two questions. Don't skip to 14. Don't skip to the 15th question in that passage. Go through those easy ones and skip the hard ones, because the thing is the easy questions are going to be worth the exact same amount to you as the difficult ones. On paper tests, this is actually fairly simple. You can mark up your booklet, and I don't think anyone really tells you that, and it's kind of passed over quickly whenever the test administrator tells you, but the test administrator will tell you that you can mark in your own booklet, right? They will say you can, that booklet is yours. You paid for it, for goodness sake. You paid for that booklet in order for you to administer that test, so you can write in that thing. I mean, you could, you could do a recreation of the Sistine Chapel for the 45 minutes that you have if you really wanted to. No one's going to cry boo at that. It's your money. All right, you paid for it. And so I'm not recommending, go ahead and write an Adventure Time comic throughout all of the pages. What I'm saying is that you can circle things, flag things, star things. You can do whatever you need to do in order to remind yourself to go back in your booklet to the skipped questions if you have the time. Okay? On computer tests, this is even easier. You can flag your skipped questions, and then there's a menu at the very end that will tell you, hey, this one is answered, this one is not. This one is flagged, okay? This one is flagged and you answered it, but you were unsure, so you flagged it, right? So you can use all of these different tools, and don't be afraid to manipulate the test to your advantage in that sort of way. Those things are there for you. So by all means, do whatever you need to do to remind yourself, oh, I need to make sure that I go back to that skipped question, all right? And don't be afraid to do that. So, more difficult questions, like I said, usually come at the end of the passage. And many people recommend reading the passage first and then answering the questions. I don't recommend reading the passage first and then going back and then going through your questions. I recommend actually reading the passage as you are reading the questions and then going back and reading the passage, because everything that you see is going to be underlined, and it's going to have a number underneath it that designates, okay, this is the section that goes to this question, right? And so you've seen that there is oftentimes an underlined portion, and so it'll say a 2 underneath, and that 2 says that goes to question number 2, right? So read the question and then go over to the underlined portion, see if you can answer it, and then go back to the question. Don't try to read the passage, go to the question, go back to the passage, go back to the question. All right? If you can comprehend as you are going, typically what you'll end up doing is reading the entire passage for yourself, and if you can, you'll end up comprehending what's going on generally in that passage, so that you might not even need to reread the whole thing in order to answer the more difficult questions. Okay? So I would recommend to answer the questions as you are going. All right. As you are answering questions, go ahead and read as you are going. All right. Just go sentence by sentence. Take your time. Don't fret too much about it, because you're not going to be losing a whole lot, because you're not going to be rereading and reading and rereading and reading and rereading and reading. Okay. So just go to the question, go, okay, where's the underlined portion? There it is. All right. Which one is my best answer? Here it is. And then go on to number 2, and then number 3, and then number 4. And if you just kind of plug away at it like that, you're going to find that you're going to end up saving a whole lot more time. And even if you end up having to skip 14 and 15, like the 14th and 15th question, those difficult questions that takes more time, that's okay. That is all right. You have answered more easy questions with more confidence than wasting time on more difficult questions with less confidence, right? You're using your time more effectively to beat the test, and that's what we want. So, one of the last things I want to tell you is that it is 99% of the time better. I would say 99.9% of the time better to have an answer marked down than to leave it blank. Okay? So what I would say is that I would dedicate the very last 2 minutes or the very last minute of the test to filling in every single answer, regardless of whether you've even read the question or not. I would say right now, this is something we've mentioned in person in classes, choose your forever bubble. Right here, right now, today, decide whether A, B, C, or D is going to be your forever bubble for the rest of your life, and anytime that you have a blank on a test that you have absolutely no idea what the answer is, that's the one you're going to go to. Okay? I don't recommend necessarily going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. No. Pick A, B, C, or D, and Now, I will say this, like I would recommend B or C personally, because whenever I was taking the test, whenever I was a wee lad, was we were told that A and D, the outside answers, are used more rarely than the inside answers, and so you would want to pick B or C. Recently, ACT and a lot of standardized tests have kind of come out, and they've kind of been like, oh, no, that's not, no, we use all of them. We use all of them as evenly as we possibly can. And to be honest with you, I smell cap. All right? I smell cap on that. I think that they're still doing the same thing. I think they're just trying to throw us off. So I would say pick B or pick C and make that your forever bubble. And anytime that you are afraid of not being able to complete the test, just fill in the rest of those answers as B or the rest of those answers in as C. All right? Now I gotta say this: do not zone out. Okay? Because your administrator or the computer that you're taking the test on will alert you to your time limits. Okay, so if you're doing your best, if you're really trying to answer all of the questions, you will get your 1 minute or 2 minute warning. And at that point, you need to dedicate the rest of that time to just making sure that the test is completely filled out no matter what. All right, forget about answering and reading the questions. Just make sure that every bubble is filled out. Okay, so pick your forever bubble right now. Which one did you pick? Okay, I think that's a good choice. I say that you go with it. I say that you rock it, and I say that you rock it for the rest of your life. All right, you'll never. And I guarantee you, there's like no reason to regret that whatsoever. Okay, so here's how you would want to prioritize. You want to answer the question, like moving through, reading the question and then going to the passage and then answering the question, and answer the question if you feel the slightest bit confident in the answer. Even if you're just a little bit confident, even if you're generally confident, even if you're 100% to like 25% confident, like, okay, maybe, probably, right? Anywhere in there, even if you are somewhat confident about the question, answer it that way. All right? More often than not, your first instinct is going to be your best one. And I've seen kids who have gone back through and they have tried to correct their tests, and they have missed just as many as they've corrected. Okay, so after you've gone through and you're answering all of the questions that you feel confident in, if you're finding questions that you are not confident in or you're spending too much time on them, skip them. Just move right along, all right? If you see that you're up on the 9 minutes for your each passage, or if you feel like you're spending too much time on each passage or a question, just skip it. It doesn't matter. Circle it in your booklet. Do whatever you need to do. Then, after you're all done with the rest of the test, if you have time, go back and then read through the question and use the process of elimination and make your best guess, okay? If you can eliminate one possibility, if you can eliminate two possibilities, all of a sudden, and I mean, like, you know this, you know that if you eliminate two possibilities, all of a sudden you've improved your chances from a 25% chance of being right to a 50% chance of being right. Right? So by all means, go ahead and use the process of elimination. And then, if all else fails, select your forever bubble in the last minute or two and just grind on through the rest of that test. Okay? So this is the scaling score of our standardized test. You'll see over here that this is the number of questions, all right? So at the very top, we have 75 because the English test has 75 questions. And then over here, you have your composite AC, not composite, but you have the total ACT score test for the English portion. So if you got 75 questions correct, you got a 36. That's a perfect score. If you got 46 questions correct, like 47 to 49, you got a 21. All right, that's a pretty middling score. So what we're going to be doing, what your assignment is going to be is, well, I'll get to that here in a second, but here I use an example. I use basically the class average because most of my kids average around 22 questions correct. All right, 22 out of 25. That's a little bit less than 1/3. Right? And so typically the most common scores that I end up getting with my 10th graders is 11 or 12 right in here. Okay. So it's maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, maybe someone way better, maybe someone way worse, but that's okay. All right. It doesn't matter. These tests don't go onto your report cards. These tests aren't going onto your grades. I just am wanting to strategize with you so that we have the data to move forward and measure your growth. Right? Now, we have a class average, and I've talked about this a little bit just as far as whenever we were in class, we have certain tiers of scores. So typically the class average is going to be right about where I told you that it's going to be kind of like around 14, 15 or lower, with 11 or 10 kind of like the median, right? So that's going to be like some of the most common ones. Now, that's a fairly low test score, and so I've designated different tiers for you to develop your own goals, all right? So if you're scoring a 14, a 13, a 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, I would say that the first goal that you have is to get a 19. Do whatever you can to get 42 questions correct. All right. So the reason why I say a 19 is that whenever you get a 19 on the ACT, that is usually the minimum requirement for any community college here in the area. That means that you have access to an associate's degree. That's a 2-year degree, and you get free college if you go from Choctaw to your ticket to Rose. All right. So free college at Rose is going to want you to get a 19 on the ACT. And so why would you ever why would free college, if you got free college available to you and the one thing that's getting in your way is an ACT, why let that be the thing that gets in the way? No. Don't let that be your obstacle. Get that 19. So make that your goal if you're down here at the 14, 13, 12 or lower. Okay. Now, if you're scoring a little bit higher, somewhere up here, 15, 16, 17, 18, and so on, the next score that you're going to want to go for is 21 to 24, because these are the minimum requirements for a lot of Oklahoma schools. Okay. I was looking up what some of the Oklahoma schools' ACT minimum requirements are. I think it was like a 24 at OU and a 23 at OSU, and at East Central University, it was a 21. So I have it bracketed here to where it's like Oklahoma schools are somewhere in these low 20s. If you want to stay in state and get a 4-year degree, you're going to want to get a minimum of at least a 21, 22, 23, or 24. All right. So if you've already got an 18, push yourself. Don't just settle for the 19. I say go up and go for the 21, the 22, or the 23 or 24, right? See if you can get a high enough score to get it into a state school as if you were a 10th grader, okay? The next tier is going to be out-of-state schools. Yesterday, I looked up the minimum requirement for Harvard, which is a prestigious Ivy League college, and their minimum requirement was 28. Now, whether or not you're a trust fund baby and your daddy has a whole lot of money, that probably changes just depending on how privileged you are, just being honest with you. ACT is just one thing that people take into consideration whenever they are looking at your college applications. They're also looking at diversity. They're also looking at money and financial income. They're looking at how much you'll need to take out in loans. They're looking at how much you'll actually end up being able to be paying to the college. They're looking at whether you're good at sports, whether you're in fine arts, so on and so forth. And so they look at a lot of these different things. And so sometimes a deficit in an ACT can be shored up by one of these other things, right? But oftentimes they're still going to at least take a glance at your ACT. So I know that Harvard's minimum, quote unquote, was a 28 for an ACT, right? And that was whenever they were like, okay, but that's like low for us. We want you to get a 32 because we're Harvard. Okay, if you want to go to Dartmouth, you need to get at least a 30. Okay, yeah, cool. Most of the time at most out-of-state schools, especially state schools like, Ohio State, UCLA, anywhere like that, going down, if you want to go down to Texas, if you want to go to Abilene, if you want to go to Kansas or whatever, typically 28, 27, 26, 25, you're going to be fine. All right. Now, getting up into this upper tier, this is what I like to call the money zone. The money zone is whenever you begin to qualify for scholarships, and that's about 28 and up is whenever you can begin to qualify for scholarships. Whenever scholarship donors or scholarship programs begin to see that you have a ACT score in a sometimes even just in a particular field. Sometimes you just need to score like maybe a 30 in just math or just reading or just English, right? And all of a sudden they're going, hey, you know what? I like the cut of your jib there, kid. I bet you'll be successful in college, and then they'll just start throwing money at you, okay? Well, it's not really always that simple, but it's a lot easier to get money with a 30 on your ACT than it is with a 21. Okay, so all of those things are for you to keep in mind, because what we're going to be doing is your assignment is to designate what your goal will be, and to answer anonymously, either on Google, on the Google Classroom, or on the test sheet that we have in class. So I want you to calculate how many more questions do you need to get correct in order to meet your goal. So if I was that student that was getting 22, so if I got 22 correct and I got an 11 and I was trying to get to a 19, all right, well, I've got 22 correct, that means I got an 11. I'm trying to get to a 19, that means I need to get 42. So 42 minus 22 is I need to get 20 more questions correct. Now, whenever you think of standardized testing, are you thinking in terms of like, oh man, I either have to do it perfect, or I have to do really well, or I have to do amazing in order to me even like bother doing it? I should be able to be like this wunderkind child who is some sort of like savant who is amazing and a prodigy. No, you don't have to be a prodigy to do fine on the ACT. Like, it is okay. Like, a 19 is okay, because that's still a huge leap. If going as a 10th grader, going from an 11 to a 19, huge leap. That's an amazing leap. And that's something to be proud of, like, as far as an accomplishment is concerned. Even if you're going from a 4 to a 14, that's still 10 points that weren't there before, right? And so just go ahead, and I want you guys to be thinking through, what is a good, realistic goal? What is a good, realistic goal for my next test, for my post-test? If I made this on my pre-test, what could I make on my post-test? And just think in terms of, you're probably going to want to get 15 to 20 more questions correct. So if you got a 30, maybe a 45 right in here. Or maybe if you got a 30, maybe a 50 would be fine. And so maybe you're going to be shooting for that 20 to 22 range. That's fine. I just want to know what your goal is, and I'm going to do everything that I can to facilitate that goal. So let's summarize. Remember to reframe your time. You are trying to complete each passage in 9 minutes, not each question in 36 seconds. And that's already going to take a lot of the pressure off. Next, don't waste time by rereading instructions that you already know. One standardized test is just that. A standardized test. It's going by a standard, and that's why they call it that. And so therefore, once you read one, you've pretty much read them all. Skip and mark down the questions that are taking too long. Okay? Make sure that you are skipping them on your answer booklet as well, and you are marking them on the testing booklet, okay? So that you remember to go back. Answer the questions and read as you go. Don't try to read the passage, go back to the question, go back to the passage, go back to the question, because that's what a lot of people end up doing. In fact, I think a lot of people end up recommending that. I personally do not. Go back. Then, if you have time, and answer the difficult questions or use the process of elimination. And then, in those last 1 or 2 minutes, don't ever leave an answer blank, and always make sure that you fill in your forever bubble. So I think that as long as you remember these strategies, I think as long as you remember these tips, I think you're already setting yourself up to do a lot better on the ACT than you did the first time, okay? You guys are brilliant. I know you guys are going to be awesome. Just keep on being as great as I know you are, and go out and do good in the world, my brilliant students.